Hi, Misha here, and this is a gun I've kind of been wanting to revisit for a while. My Daewoo Precision Industries, if you want to be exact, DP51. This is the export version of their military K5 pistol, chambered for 9mm NATO Parabellum. And at first it seems very conventional, single double action gun, alloy frame, 13 shot, double stack mag. Very much in keeping with a lot of the Wonder 9s from the 80s. But it does have a couple of interesting things and is surprisingly well made. Now this is, again, what was made in the 80s and 90s. Daewoo Precision Industries no longer exists. Today they are S&T Motive, still in South Korea. They went through a company change, name change, and now their guns are imported under the Lionheart name, and the DP51 became the LH9 here. It's basically the same gun. Same 13 round mag. But they have given it a bit of a 21st century facelift, modernization. So I thought we would compare and contrast the two. Of course, it's me, so we're going to talk about the history too. And maybe just touch on Korean guns in general, because they've kind of been sleeper guns. I think in recent years they are starting to get credit for making very decent firearms for a good price, but for a long time they were overlooked, and therefore, yeah, let's revisit the Daewoo K5, the DP51, the Lionheart LH9. So here's the cardboard box the LH9 comes in, and inside it, get a pretty common but neat Lionheart logo tactical case. Below that, there's some usual paperwork and gobbledygook. Pretty decent packaging, all things considered. Here we are, two 13 round factory mags. Get the pistol. It doesn't really seem to have a place specific in the case for it, but just set it in there. And we have a little zipper pocket up here with actually this has two test fire cartridges, cable lock, brush, cleaning rod, and wax paper. Apparently Jay doesn't oil his guns. And some other stuff. There's this thing. Looks like a vial of something. And some other cleaning gear. But yeah, pretty decent little cleaning kit, all things said. I like it when a company at least puts effort into how a product looks, presentation, and they give you practical stuff, not useless stuff like tactical cases like these. And while the cleaning kit probably wouldn't be my absolute first choice, you know, it's there, it could be worse, and at least you know that they did test fire it. So with that, we'll move on.
It's the Lionheart LH9. Clear.
Unlike a lot of guns on the market, the Daewoo here is based on a military firearm. In fact, that was its original purpose. It wasn't designed for the civilian commercial market. South Korea was pretty dependent on foreign military products, aid, what have you. But as the time wore on, they started to manufacture their own stuff. Now, the factory that became Daewoo Precision started off as a Colt setup factory, producing the Model 603K, which is the Korean version of the M16A1. They also produced the M60 and a few others. In the 80s, they started to get a little more daring and designed their own models like the K1A and eventually K2. These would be basically a submachine gun replacement and a rifle replacement, respectively. After that, they wanted a modern service gun. So, beginning around 1984, work began. And it seems like the prototype was known as XK5. It was tried out in 1988, accepted, and then full production was authorized in 1989. And military adoption either happened that year or the following year, depending on which source you ask. So, 89-90, pretty modern. The K5 was the military name's designation. DP51 here is kind of the export name. This fires 9x19 parabellum, NATO. Has a 4-inch barrel. Has a relatively compact grip with a 13-round mag. Pretty standard 3-dot sights with the rear dovetailed in. Frame is alloy. Slide is steel. We'll talk about some of its mechanical features very soon. But it's worth saying right now that many ascribe it to being copies of this gun or that gun. Much like with the K1A and K2, it's its own gun. To me, personally, it actually reminds me quite a bit of the SIG P228, Sig Sauer P228 to be exact, and the Walther P88, believe it or not. Although a lot of people call it a Beretta, which I don't at all agree with, because this uses a Browning tilting tipping barrel, not the Beretta style. Others kind of compare it with pretty much everything. And it's really not. And I think people think it's bigger than it is because it's a pretty small gun. It was meant for a carry gun for a military officer or police officer. So they didn't go big and bulky like with the Beretta M9. It has a lot of interesting elements. One thing, the mags are patterned after the Smith & Wesson Model 59, so much so that they're interchangeable more or less. And there's not a lot you can do with the sidearm. It was built to be durable, dependable, reliable, also lightweight, and has been South Korea's standard issue gun ever since the early 90s, and is still very much in service today. Even though, actually, Daewoo as a company no longer exists. So let's look at some of its interesting features, including what Daewoo called its fast-action trigger. So, as pointed out, this is a double, single action trigger system. So when it fires, triggers here, pretty standard. But as most of you know, it has a third setting, what is called triple action. Pull your hammer back, and if you want, you can flick it forward. You can also flick it back again. If you notice, it has spring tension, but not much of it. So your main spring is compressed. Of course, the modern gun still has that feature. It's a little stiffer, a little heavier spring there, but it still compresses your main spring. So the benefits. Well, you can carry with the hammer down, and it has all the internal safeties engaged. And your trigger can either be in the forward position, like this, or you can pull it back, and it kind of stages, flicking it back, and then you can finish pulling through. Also, if you are back here in single action, you can flick it forward, putting your trigger back. It's actually quite flexible. And the modern gun works much the same way. A little stiffer. But it does have a slightly nicer single action pull. Of course, when you do it, you have it here. You can push that. And it's not just a gimmick. This level of flexibility is actually quite good for a soldier. Instead of having a gun with the hammer back, which is a very aggressive stance, not to mention safety concerns, having it forward like this, you can have a round in the chamber safely. It's a far less aggressive look for police or military. And then even though you have the long pull of a double action, you have the light pull of a single. So you can pull through very quickly. And it is, like I said, a little bit staged to where you can pull back here to the stopping point. It's pretty forgiving here in this area. At that point, you can do it again or continue through with your shot. And they've pretty much retained this feature. A little more noticeable, a little more solid there, but you can easily stage it there and either decide to or follow through. Other features are pretty standard on these. This is mainly the trigger system. You have a standard Browning style mag release. It is ambidextrous. You can flip it from side to side. I guess it's reversible more than ambidextrous, to be fair. This one does not have a rail. Small rear serrations. Pretty standard iron sights for that day and time. We have an ambidextrous manual safety here. Locks the trigger. You can also do that. Safety. And locks the trigger. And of course it'll work in the triple mode too. You can also charge the slide with the safety on, meaning that it stays on. The safety's ambi, but the slide stop is only on this side. It does have serrated back and front straps. And the front here is inletted to get the mag out in case it's stuck, you know, let's say, yeah, kind of neat. And the modern pistol carries those features over. Still has the same type of safety here. This particular one still doesn't have a rail. It does have front slide serrations and rear, and they're a larger style. The sights have also been a little bit altered. We have a hooked trigger guard. I think they have some straight, more curvy ones too, but I could be wrong on that. And obviously the biggest difference too are the grips. Still has serrations back and front. But the only real big crime of the LH9, there's no lanyard loop. There's a plug. But how can you operate without a lanyard loop? That's Hobo's opinion. Well, with that, we'll move on. So what about the LH9 here? Yeah, Daewoo is now, or at least as close as anything, S&T motive, which is kind of funny because the Daewoo car was pretty famous even without the guns being so. And the US company that has been importing these is Lionheart. I've seen this called the DP51 Mark II, or the K5 Mark II, and some say a lot of the changes were inspired by the American market and American company. I don't know. But this is a relatively new gun, and it's very, very similar. Again, it has kind of new modern grips, more of a modern finish to the metal. You notice this has a straight hammer, or more of a shelf. This is more of a rounded hammer, ring hammer, which makes sense for a carry gun. Yes, you can get these with a rail. There are some other options. Different sights as well, different finishes. The originals were just pretty much black with the kind of a military grade bluing on top and the alloy frame. And mags are pretty well unchanged to this very day, although I think they do make an extended 15 rounder. Very light gun. As far as I know, the Korean military K5s still look more or less like this. And this is a version done for the American market. That's not to say it's bad. If nothing else, I really do like that the pistol here was designed to meet the needs of a military, not just for a consumer market. That means it had to be tough, dependable, reliable, and have a pretty long lifespan. And it seems to have done that. This has been in service for 30 years. Still seems to be going strong today. It is made in South Korea for South Koreans, so they don't have to rely on anyone else for their military sidearm, just as they do not with their military rifles. The triple action, or fast action, some might consider a gimmick, and I suppose it is, but I think it is a somewhat practical gimmick, and if you don't want to use it, don't. Just use it in double or single action mode, and don't worry about it. These are both in 9mm, of course. They have done versions in 40, 45, and even 380. So they do a few different styles and types. And these used to be pretty inexpensive, a couple $100. I think today, depending on the variant of the LH9 you get, they're in the $500 to $800 range, depending on the accessories and whatnot. And as we looked at originally, they come with a decent accessory kit. And with that, it just seemed like a neat pistol to revisit. I know pistols aren't the most exciting things ever, but why not? With that, this is Misha, and as always, if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please post them below. And as with every other YouTube channel, if you could like, share, and subscribe. Jay and I both will catch you very soon next time.